I saw my father's face turn gray just minutes after dessert was served. He clutched his stomach, staggered up from the table, and made it halfway down the hallway before the sounds began. Wrenching, violent retching that echoed through the pristine walls of my parents' colonial-style home. Crystal clinked, silverware stopped midair. My mother Diane stood frozen beside the sideboard, her fingers still curled around the empty glass she had so lovingly handed to my husband earlier that evening. Only he hadn't drunk it. I had watched Julian switch glasses with my father. At the time, I didn't understand why. It had felt like nothing more than one of those quiet marital codes. The subtle glances, the silent gestures only two people in sync can read. He'd taken the glass she offered him with a tight-lipped smile, then reached for another before she could protest. "Let me help carry these out," he had said, ever the helpful guest, ever the polite son-in-law. But now, as I watched Gerald collapse onto the tile floor, wheezing and groaning, the gesture replayed in my mind like a silent warning I hadn't heeded. My mother rushed to his side, barking orders for towels, water, a cold compress. "It must have been the shrimp," she gasped, wide-eyed and pale. "Or the sangria." I told the caterer to be careful. Julian sat perfectly still. He didn't panic, didn't speak, just stared at the crumpled body of the man who had spent the last 6 years of our marriage mocking his career, questioning his manhood, and finding every possible way to belittle his worth. Something about the way Julian's jaw clenched told me he had seen this coming, and I hadn't. The shame prickled behind my ears before I could stop it, because deep down I knew my parents had never accepted him, not really, but they were still my parents. I had spent my entire life explaining their behavior away with practiced excuses. They mean well. They're just old-fashioned. They love me, they just don't understand him. I never asked what happened to that glass. I never asked why my mother had taken so long in the kitchen, or what she had whispered to Julian when she handed him that drink. I'd seen her smile, too wide, too bright, and I'd looked away, because looking closer might have meant facing something I wasn't ready to believe. That my own mother could hurt the man I loved. The rest of the evening blurred. EMTs came. Gerald refused the hospital, pride overriding prudence, as usual. Diane made a show of cleaning everything up herself. Guests whispered, excused themselves early. My younger brother Owen offered to drive Julian and me home, but Julian declined. "I think we'll take a walk," he said instead, his tone unreadable. We walked in silence the first 2 blocks. Then he finally spoke. "She tried to drug me," he said flatly. "I saw her pour something in." I stopped walking. "What?" His eyes met mine, not angry, not accusing, just tired. "She had 2 glasses. One was for me. I switched them." I laughed, the kind of brittle, involuntary laugh that rises when panic hits your spine. "That's not funny, Julian. I'm not joking." And just like that, the world tilted. The wind felt sharper against my skin. The street lamps too bright. My husband, the man who had followed me into a family that never really welcomed him, now stood in front of me, calm as a lake, telling me my own mother may have poisoned him. And I couldn't find a single reason to doubt him, but I still did, because if I didn't, what did that make me? What did that make her? I used to believe my family was perfect. Not in the sitcom kind of way. We didn't take Christmas card photos in matching sweaters or laugh over pancake breakfasts. But we looked good on paper. Colonial house in the best part of Asheville. Private schools. Summer trips to Maine. My mother ran every charity auction like a 5-star general. My father, Gerald, was a partner at one of the most prestigious financial firms in the state. My younger brother Owen was the golden boy, football captain turned investment prodigy. And me? I was the well-behaved daughter who never caused trouble, never raised her voice, never dated anyone my parents didn't approve of. Until Julian. I didn't choose that life. I was born into it. And in my family, Birthright came with invisible strings. My clothes, my friends, my college major, all gently nudged in the direction Diane and Gerald preferred. I thought it was normal. Until it wasn't. Thomas was the first person I truly loved. We met in undergrad. He was thoughtful, funny, brilliant, a med student with a soft spot for underprivileged kids, and an even softer spot for my obsession with rivers and wetlands. He brought me flowers, he picked off hiking trails, and let me talk for hours about my thesis. I was happy, but happiness didn't fit into my parents' blueprint. It's not that we don't like him, my mother had said one evening, swirling a glass of Chardonnay with theatrical restraint. We just think he's complicated. His background, family issues, unstable roots. My father had been less subtle. He'll hold you back. They never said the words directly, not at first. But things started happening. Thomas got an anonymous tip about a cheating scandal he never committed. I found screenshots in my inbox, messages between him and another girl that turned out to be fabricated. I believed them. I broke it off. A year later, I found out the other girl didn't exist. By then, it didn't matter. The damage was done. That was the first time I felt the cold edge of my parents' control, and the guilt of choosing them over someone who loved me. So when Julian came into my life, with his quiet confidence and his camera always slung over his shoulder, I kept him hidden for longer than I should have. I met him at a gallery showing in Asheville. His photographs were bold and intimate, full of color and texture. He made the world look softer, more alive. I fell in love faster than I wanted to. When I finally introduced him to my parents, they did what they always did, smiled through their teeth, shook his hand a little too hard, called his work impressive with that slight upward inflection that meant the exact opposite. It's a good phase, my mother told me later, patting my hand like I was 12 again. Creative types burn bright and burn out. You'll see. They never said it outright, but they believed Julian was a stopgap, a season I would grow out of. The way you grow out of guitar lessons or orange lipstick. But I didn't. I married him. And the moment we said our vows, I could feel the shift. The coldness that had once been coated in passive aggression became sharper, more direct. My mother still smiled at him, always with that slightly too long eye contact. My father still asked about his little hobby at every dinner, as if Julian didn't shoot for National Geographic or pay half our mortgage with wedding commissions. Sometimes Julian would laugh it off. Sometimes he'd go silent. And sometimes, late at night, I'd find him editing photos in his studio with headphones on, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, pretending not to notice that I noticed. I thought he was strong enough to take it. I thought I was strong enough to keep the peace. But now I wondered. How long had he been swallowing their contempt? How long had I let him? And worse, what kind of wife did that make me? The morning after my father collapsed at dinner, I stood in my kitchen, staring into a mug of untouched coffee, and felt like my life had quietly cracked open overnight. Julian hadn't said a word when we got home. He'd kissed me lightly on the forehead, said he was tired, and disappeared into his studio. I stayed awake until 3 a.m., waiting for the courage to ask him again, "Did she really try to drug you?" But the question sat on my tongue like acid. I couldn't bring myself to say it, because saying it meant believing it. And believing it meant everything I'd ever trusted, every family birthday, every childhood memory, every holiday tradition, might have been built on something poisoned. Literally. I opened my phone to check messages. There was one missed call from my mother, one from my father, a cheery group text from Owen's wife, Vanessa. Hope everyone's okay. Weirdest birthday ever, right? But there was also another message, a private one, just a name and a file. From Vanessa, you need to see this. Don't show it to them. Not yet. My fingers trembled as I downloaded the file. It was surveillance footage, grainy, colorless, with a timestamp from the night before. The camera was mounted high in the kitchen corner, pointed toward the marble countertop and the wine glasses my mother had so carefully arranged. I watched as Diane entered the frame, humming, carrying 2 glasses. She pulled a tiny vial from her pocket, tipped a few drops into one, stirred it gently with a cocktail pick. Her face didn't change. No hesitation, no remorse, just the same smile she'd worn my entire life, polished, practiced, perfect. Then I saw Julian walk in. She startled slightly, composed herself. "This one's for you," she said, pressing the glass into his hand. He took it, and then took the other one too. The clip ended. I sat back in my chair, unable to move. The breath in my lungs felt thick. Slow. Unreal. I replayed the footage again, and again, and again. There was no misunderstanding, no mix-up, no bad shrimp. She had done it. My mother had drugged my husband, and my father had drunk it instead. It should have ended there. But the next video loaded automatically, a new timestamp, 2 hours later. The same kitchen, the same people. Diane was pacing, frantic. "You drank the wrong one," she hissed. "How could you be so stupid?" Gerald snapped, gripping the countertop. "This isn't the first time, Diane. You need help." "Don't turn this on me," she shouted. "I'm doing what needs to be done. Julian is ruining her. She was supposed to build a life, not babysit some starving artist with a camera and a dream." My vision blurred. I could barely process the words, but I heard them, each syllable scraping like broken glass across my chest. Then came the worst part, the part that made me feel like I'd swallowed fire. Diane lowered her voice, calm now, calculated. "Don't worry," she said. "I've already started talking to Haley, planting seeds, about the distance in their marriage, about how unhappy she looks, about how maybe, just maybe, she deserves better." She smiled. "She'll come home, just like she always does." I slammed my laptop shut, and for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own mother. I didn't cry. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even as I stared at my mother's smiling face on old photo frames perched neatly on her hallway shelf. I didn't cry. Because somewhere deep inside me, something colder had begun to settle. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was confusion. Betrayal. And the kind of grief you feel when you realize the people who raised you have been playing a game you never knew you were part of. And you've been losing since the beginning. I didn't tell Julian what I'd seen. I couldn't, not until I understood how far it went. Not until I knew this wasn't just a moment of madness, but a pattern, a strategy, a sickness that had lived in my family long before he entered the picture. So I started digging. I called Thomas, the man I once thought I would marry, my college boyfriend, the one I left after a cheating scandal that now felt almost too convenient. We hadn't spoken in nearly a decade. I didn't expect him to answer, but he did. His voice was quiet, tired. "Haley," he said, "are you okay?" I didn't bother with small talk. "I need to ask you something. That girl, the screenshots, did you cheat on me?" Silence, then a bitter laugh. "Your mom really did a number on you, didn't she?" I froze. "She reached out to me," he continued, "a few weeks before we broke up. Said she wanted to understand the man dating her daughter. I told her to stay out of it. The next week, you got those emails." My stomach dropped. "I tried to explain," he said, "but by then, you didn't believe me anymore." "I'm sorry," I whispered. "Don't be. I get it now. I didn't then, but I do." I hung up and sat in the dark. One name wasn't enough. I reached out to others, old friends who drifted, roommates who had suddenly stopped calling, even an old art professor I loved, who'd once encouraged me to submit a paper to a national environmental journal. I never did, because my mother said it would be too political. Every person I spoke to added another piece to the puzzle. People didn't just disappear from my life. They were pushed out, and I had let it happen. Because I thought it was normal. Because I trusted that when my mother whispered They're not good for you. She was protecting me. But she wasn't. She was shaping me, molding me into someone who only needed her. The worst confirmation came from Vanessa. We met in a park near her son's preschool. She handed me a second USB. More footage, she said, her voice low. They don't know I have access to the backup server. That night, I watched everything. More footage from the dinner. Diane whispering behind Julian's back. Gerald rolling his eyes when my husband complimented the food. Owen, silent, shrinking, clearly used to the tension. Then, a clip that nearly broke me. Gerald, standing in the living room 2 days after the incident, saying plainly, if Haley doesn't leave him, she's not the daughter I raised. And Diane, smiling. Don't worry, she said. I've started talking to her about their problems. She thinks it's her idea. By the time I'm done, she'll file for divorce and thank me for it. I covered my mouth. That wasn't control anymore. That was war. And I was the battlefield. I sat on our porch for hours after that, staring at the stars I used to think meant something. I thought about Julian, about the way he smiled when no one was watching, the way he brought me coffee when I worked too late, the way he never once, not once, spoke badly about my parents, even when they treated him like he didn't belong. I thought about how close I'd come to believing them, to walking away from the only person who had truly, unconditionally loved me. They almost won, but not this time. I didn't tell Julian right away. I couldn't, not because I didn't trust him, but because I didn't trust myself. I was still processing the weight of what I'd uncovered, not just the footage, not just the betrayal, but the entire architecture of my childhood collapsing in slow motion. I needed to be sure. I needed control over something, anything, in a world that had been choreographed for me since I was born. So instead, I asked him to skip Sunday dinner. He blinked, surprised. You sure? I nodded. I just need some space. For us. No noise. He didn't ask questions. He never pushed when I closed off. He simply waited at the edge of whatever storm I was weathering. That night, as he edited photos in his studio, I sat beside him in silence, holding his hand, memorizing the shape of peace I had almost let my mother destroy. The next day, I made a plan. I printed the lab results from the toxicology report Julian had quietly run after the dinner, the one showing benzodiazepines in the wine glass. I pulled the prescription history I'd found for Diane, 3 different doctors, overlapping orders for Xanax. I made copies of the emails Thomas had sent me, the text messages from Mom, the footage, everything, and then I waited. My opportunity came wrapped in a casual comment, as it always did. I need a new profile photo, my mother said during a call with me and Owen. Haley, darling, you think Julian would take a few shots? He's got such a good eye for hiding wrinkles. I almost laughed. Sure, I said sweetly. I'll come by Saturday. Just me. She sounded thrilled. I arrived alone, camera bag in one hand, a sealed envelope in the other. My heart thudded like a drum in my chest as I stepped through the door. The same hallway I'd grown up in, the same scent of jasmine and lemon polish, the same woman standing in front of me, all pearls and powder and perfectly ironed sleeves, smiling like she hadn't tried to sabotage my marriage. You look tired, she said, kissing my cheek. Rough week. I smiled tightly. Something like that. We walked to the sitting room where the light was best. I set the camera down, but didn't open the bag. Before we start, I said, there's something I want you to see. I handed her the envelope. She opened it slowly, lips pursed, like she was preparing herself for an unwanted gift. She read the lab report first, then the prescriptions, then the screenshots. Her hands started to tremble. This is absurd, she whispered. I would never. We both know what happened. I interrupted, my voice cold. What I don't know is why. Her eyes narrowed. The performance dropped. You want the truth, she snapped. Fine. Because he's not good enough for you, Haley. He never was. A man should provide stability, not wander around taking pictures of moss and birds. So drugging him was the answer, I said quietly. It wasn't going to hurt him, she snapped back. Just enough to make him sick. Miss his precious gallery opening. Maybe you'd see how unreliable he is. I stared at her. And in that moment, I realized she truly believed it. This ends now, I said. You're going to tell Dad. You're going to stop interfering. You're going to leave my marriage alone. She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. Please, he'll believe me over you. He always does. I picked up my bag. Maybe. But he won't believe you over this. I left without taking a single photo. That night, she called Julian, claimed I'd been hostile during our session, said I was emotional, even threatening, said maybe he should keep an eye on me. Maybe I wasn't as stable as I used to be. When Julian told me, I didn't even react. Instead, I opened my laptop and showed him everything. The lab report, the messages, the videos, the clip of my mother confessing on camera. His expression didn't change, but his eyes said everything. I'm sorry, I whispered. He took my hand. Don't be. I just needed you to see it for yourself. And I had seen it, and now I would make sure everyone else did too. I didn't sleep the night before. I lay awake beside Julian, staring at the ceiling, replaying every lie, every manipulation, every whispered warning I'd ignored for years. My childhood had been built like a mansion, big, impressive, and spotless on the surface. But the foundation had been cracked the entire time, and now I was about to rip off the facade in front of everyone who still believed it was real. Owen and Vanessa arrived early. Vanessa looked calm, but I could see the tension in her shoulders. Owen looked unsure, still loyal, still stuck in the narrative our parents had woven since we were kids, that they were flawless, and any discomfort we felt was just a lack of gratitude. Are you sure about this? Owen asked, glancing nervously at my laptop. I'm sure, I said. But you don't have to stay if... I'm staying, Vanessa interrupted. Her voice didn't shake. I've waited years for this. At 7:05 p.m., we walked into my parents' living room. Diane was waiting on the couch, dressed like she always was, like she might be photographed at any moment. Gerald stood behind her, arms crossed, a glass of bourbon in his hand, already assuming this would be nothing but a dramatic misunderstanding he could diffuse with charm and condescension. I understand there's been a situation, he said smoothly. Let's sit and talk like adults. No more talking, I said, plugging my laptop into the TV. You're going to watch. Julian hit play. The footage played without sound, the moment in the kitchen, the vial, the switch, Gerald drinking the wrong glass. Then the aftermath, the screaming, the accusations, the clip where Diane said she was planting ideas in my head, the conversation about Thomas, the plan to make me file for divorce and think it was my idea. Gerald's glass clinked against his teeth. Diane tried to speak, but I raised my hand. We're not done. I opened the email thread from Thomas, played a voice memo from one of my college professors, showed screenshots of messages Diane had sent me over the years, all disguised as concern, all chipping away at Julian in little, calculated pieces. When it was over, the silence was suffocating. Diane's face was pale. Gerald looked stunned. Not by the evidence, but by the fact that his control had failed. I love you both, I said, my voice low, steady. But what you've done is unforgivable. You don't get to control my life anymore. Owen stood beside me. You did it to her, he said, turning to Diane. You tried to do it to us too. You only started liking Vanessa after we had James, after you had leverage. Gerald's voice cracked. You're overreacting. No, Owen snapped. We're finally reacting, and it's long overdue. Diane began to cry, not out of remorse, out of loss. Her empire was falling. I took a breath and stepped forward. I handed Gerald a USB drive. This has everything. The footage, the messages, the testimonies. You can keep it." He narrowed his eyes. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means I'm not going to ruin your reputation by sharing this," I said, "because that would hurt me and Julian and our future, and I would never do that." I let the pause hang in the air. "But if you ever try to sabotage us again or manipulate me, or so much as whisper to another person about how Julian isn't good enough, then every board member at your firm, every member at your golf club, every business partner you've ever shaken hands with, they'll all get a copy." He looked at me for a long time. And for the first time in my life, Gerald Mercer didn't have anything to say. 6 months ago, I would have begged for their approval. Now, I didn't even need their silence. I just needed their absence. And I finally had it. 6 months passed. Not a single Sunday dinner. Not a single passive-aggressive phone call. Not a single surprise visit with Diane showing up at my doorstep just to drop something off. It was quiet, suspiciously quiet, like the calm after a storm. But also the kind that makes you wonder if the hurricane is just waiting for its next chance. Julian, and I didn't speak much about that night, the confrontation. We didn't need to. Some things, once named, no longer need to be repeated. They simply change the way you move in the world. But I will say this, I walked differently after that. I breathed differently. I laughed more. I cried harder. I lived like I'd been underwater my whole life and had finally broken through to the surface. And then a new chapter began. I found out I was pregnant. Julian was in the kitchen when I told him. I didn't even need to say the words. I just held out the test with shaking hands. His smile wasn't huge or loud or cinematic. It was soft, deep, reverent, like he knew exactly how much this meant and how much we'd both fought to earn this peace. When we told my parents, we didn't invite them to lunch or host a family dinner. Ise na text. Simple. Direct. We're having a baby. Please respect our boundaries. Diane responded within minutes. That's wonderful news. Come stay with us for a while. We can help make things easier. You'll need rest. We can be there for you. I stared at the screen, then put the phone down without replying, because help was never what she wanted to offer. It was control, access, leverage. And this time, I wasn't handing her any. 3 weeks later, we received a letter from a law firm in Charlotte. At first, my heart pounded, panic flashing in like a bad habit. But when Julian opened the envelope, he froze, then smiled. It was a deed.